Hello and welcome to the Back Pass, a podcast for sports nerds by sports nerds. On tonight's episode, we talk about trigger warning for non-United fans, the Red Giants from Manchester winning their first trophy since 2017. Welcome to the Back Pass. I'm your host, Ali Milwala, and today I'm joined by two fellow Red to the Core Devils, Gurpreet and Kevin. Lads, we're officially at Ten Hag. Looks like we'll be at Ten Hag in no time at all. How's everyone feeling?
Ali, I have waited way too long for an intro like that. Glory, glory, Man United.
Kevin?
You can't wake up to a better morning than a cup win. Doesn't matter what cup, just a cup win.
It really is gone are the days when you had your half your reserve team and Fergie fielded the 18-year-olds and you had Ben Foster in goal, and the League Cup was like maybe we'll win it, maybe we won't. Oh well. And it's now we have to win something.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, Ali. I mean, I was sort of thinking about that, like growing up, the League Cup as it's been called, way down the pecking order. But the reality is, over the last 10 years since Fergie, we've been in a different place, right? And it just felt like the signs are there under Ten Hag that we're turning the corner. This massive ship that was a juggernaut of success, has been sinking, and he's turning that around. And I think this is almost it's hardware that validates that whatever Ten Hag has been doing is working.
Yeah, I think that you nailed it with your last point. It's a measure, it's a yardstick to say that the team's improving. Like, we can see it, but this is now something tangible that we can, put on the shelves, so to speak, and drink out of.
I mean, for a trophy that, apparently no one really wants for the longest time, Tottenham still don't have it.
Yeah.
I had a good chuckle at our old mate Ashish. He fired through a meme of Harry Maguire, who's now got more trophies than Harry Kane. And look, we laugh about it, but Rio Ferdinand said it in his post-match rap. End of the day, it's a title, right? And that's what matters at the end of your career. It's the titles. And you look at the likes of Casemiro and Varane today, and these are guys who've won multiple Champions League trophies. Varane is a World Cup winner. Licha Martinez won the World Cup 3 months ago, right? Less than 3 months ago. And you look at the passion with which those guys were celebrating. That's what trophies do, man. It's it counts and it matters. And if anyone says it doesn't, well, just ask Varane, Martinez, and Casemiro.
Oh, better yet, ask the Newcastle boys, because they looked pretty devastated at the end of the game.
100%. Well said.
Except for
Yeah,
Dubravka. Dubravka is pretty pleased with himself. I wonder if his medal gets mailed out to him, or if he had to sneakily get himself on stage to collect one and just walk off head down.
Imagine that. Hey boys, I'm just gonna duck out for a while. Yeah, just one sec. I'm just gonna go up there, get my winner's medal. I love it. Totally love it.
But the game itself, we've gotten used to this recent trend where Man United actually have the most goals scored by substitutes in the top 5 European leagues. So we're currently sitting at 19 goals by subs this season, which is huge. And so Ten Hag's really good at making really good substitutions. But in this game itself, the subs weren't needed. Like, the game was wrapped up. The players just wrapped the game up in the first half, and then it was just about game management and seeing it out.
it was interesting listening to Ten Hag post-match, Ali. I gotta say, I love the honesty and just the forthrightness with which he speaks. And the word that he kept using was adaptability, right? So he said he wanted his team to be adaptable because Newcastle give you different problems. And Kevin, I think you made a really good point. You look at how devastated their fans were, and I actually think they played really well. They were unlucky to lose. I mean, we can hype it up, we can lap it up, but we had to beat a proper team out there, and like United, Newcastle are also on an upwards trajectory. That was a proper game. That was an arm wrestle. That was a tussle. I thought the first 20 minutes were very physical. Ali, talking to you early in the morning on WhatsApp, it was a far cry from Barcelona.
Yep.
It was a very physical game.
Yeah, it was.
And I think what we did was we scored early. We scored too early. And after that, I think the team just adjusted, and we basically just killed the game. Right? There was no need to bring Garnacho on or bring Sancho on in a different role. It was just about shutting the game down. And it kind of reminded me a lot of how Fergie's team in 2008 played. Right? That was a team that had obviously peak Ronaldo, peak Rooney, serial game winners, but also that was a team that could dance different ways. Right? They would adapt, and if you needed low block counter-attack to beat Arsenal, they would do that. If you needed mid-block to counter Barcelona at Nou Camp, they would do that, right?
Yep.
If they needed to go full throttle to score 5 goals against relegation fodder, they could do that. I got the impression today that that's kind of what Ten Hag wants. He wants this team to play a number of ways, not just his way, right? And I get a feeling he kind of doesn't have a way, right? He wants the team to adapt.
Yeah, and I think you kind of forget as well that in the last 10 days, including this game, United played Barcelona twice, and that would have not only did they play Leicester in the middle of that, but they played Barcelona twice. So that's 4 games in 10 days that they've gone through, and they kind of coasted to the end where they kind of had preserved energy, got up early over Newcastle, and then sat back and just withheld pressure.
Yeah, that's so. Looking at the game, like the importance of Casemiro is just it's huge. He's the best. We talked about it before. He's I think without a doubt he's one of the best transfers in the EPL, probably in the world game. Like I can't think of a better transfer at the moment. And he was.
What do you
just
mean? Like
so
Barcelona signed some amazing players.
Yeah, let's see how that went.
Well, I mean, Siobhan's not on here. Otherwise, I would have mentioned Enzo Fernandez, but we'll mention him anyway, right? Like, I mean, Casemiro's like, there's no comparison with like any other midfielder.
Yeah, exactly. So coming back to it, so the thing that I noticed the most was when we were attacking, Cas was amazing. He was up front. That goal, he was in the perfect position for. I mean, sure, taking that kick, that was a bit unexpected. He would be like if you told me like at the end of this game that Shaw would have an assist, I would have said, yeah, maybe, and it was like a lucky sort of tap on to Rashi as he breaks.
Yeah.
Not really a cross, but the tactical shift, which is what I was really impressed by. Exactly, they played Barcelona. They've had a handful of games in the last 10 days. The press was less. It wasn't as high intensity. I think that was a tactical choice.
Yep.
But they were still in the right position, right? And they were still making. And there were times where Saint Maxim made that got past Dalot in 1-on-1. I thought what was probably the interchange or the sub that was the most important was getting Dalot off for Wan-Bissaka. Because Wan-Bissaka in 1-on-1 is like man on man is a much better player.
Yeah.
And that also made a difference because, I don't think a lot of coaches do this well, where they get up and they're able to shift the team's mentality to hold leads and go into defensive structures. Sometimes teams can just sort of ride their own momentum and start making mistakes in counter and stuff like that. So I thought that was huge. And just coming on Newcastle threw a lot at us, and I thought. So Maxim was unlucky. There was a couple of times where Almiron had some good shots. I think they couldn't get it to Wilson. That interchange in the first half between the midfield and the front was a problem. And then when Longstaff came off, then it was a problem from the back to the midfield.
Yeah, nailed it. Yeah. Nailed it. Yeah, and I think if you look at the way Newcastle play, it's really interesting because Ali, you touched on it. The last 10 days, we've had Barcelona and then Leicester. And let's remember, we struggled in that first half against Leicester, then Barcelona again, and now this final. It was really, in many ways, a season-defining 10 days, right? That there was ample space for this to go very, very wrong for Ten Hag and the boys. And the way they've executed, I think, has just been, the execution has been exceptional, right? And whether you like United or you don't, you've got to give United credit for the way this has been executed. The tactics over the last 10 games have been executed perfectly, but it's also been the variety, right? You look at the way a Leicester play to the way a Barcelona play to the way Newcastle play, and it's very different, right? Newcastle, for me, were probably tactically the most intriguing team because they give you very different problems. I think there's a very good reason the press doesn't work against Newcastle. And that's because, and I know we were raving on about Trippier this morning, but you look at the players they have that carry the ball really well. So you look at Bruno Guimaraes. He's an excellent ball carrier. The way Eddie Howe has transformed Joe Linton from a really failed centre forward to I can't even tell you what it is. He's like a number 8, right?
Just a running number.
A running midfielder, right? But an athlete, someone who carries the ball really well. Saint Maxim, we know about, right? He gives you absolute fits, and I think with where United are at right now, where our pressing game really isn't at, say, Arsenal or City levels, it was probably the right thing to do to not press them high and to sort of sit in like this mid to lowish block and not to have that space in behind. Because I think that's what we did really well. I think that's the kind of space that Wilson thrives on. And Wilson today he was basically a passenger, right? Like there was just no space. There was no space for Newcastle to carry the ball and then to feed him. And when they did get the ball around Wilson, we had that triangle that we spoke about pre-show. Varane, Licha Martinez, and Casemiro, and they just clamped down on things. And I think when you're setting up like that to go a goal up, it kind of forced Newcastle to. Kevin, you touched on it. When they took Longstaff off and they brought Isak on, I kind of knew at that point the game was over because their problem after that would have been effectively what Ten Hag did after that was he moved Bruno into the number 8 role and we just went man for man in midfield. And then the whole problem was, well, how do you get the ball into midfield? And at that point, the moment Fabian Schär and Botman started carrying the ball into midfield, you knew it was game over on the counter. It was just the game management, I thought, was exceptional, off the back of that Barcelona game. Because we couldn't play against Newcastle the way we played against Barcelona. That would never work.
Yeah, fully agree.
And other than that, you need, for all our analysis, for our tactics, these games come down to, Ralph Rangnick used to go on about it. The first goal is so crucial, right? In these big games, when you get the first goal, well, actually, Barcelona got the first goal, right? But
they got the first goal in 2 games, right?
Yeah, in 2 games, right? So maybe not against Ten Hag's.
And that's where the substitutes come in. But I think the biggest change and the reason why this feels very different to when Louis van Gaal won the FA Cup with United or when Jose Mourinho won the League Cup, the reason it feels different is because it seems like United are going into games having the upper hand. And if they don't, they can tactically shift so quickly and gain the upper hand within the same match that opponents literally can't get the best off United. Ole Gunnar had like the classic problem of, say, these same 10 games, if while Ole Gunnar was manager, the part he struggled with, he would have probably beaten Barcelona. He would have set up the team on the counter. Let's absorb Barcelona. Let them have 70% of the possession. We'll pick them off. We'll get the goals. But then we would have struggled against Leicester and Newcastle because they wouldn't have quite given us that same space, and we wouldn't have been able to counter the same way, and wouldn't have been able to set up that low blocker that same way. That would suit it, but it would work against the bigger teams. And that was Ole Gunnar's biggest problem, was how to be a bit more of a progressive team, where Ten Hag seems to have that balance of, we can ebb and flow in moments, and we can be a progressive team. We can be a team on the counter, in the transition, but we could also, have that balance as well. And that's what the real positivity comes from, is that he's making the most of a squad that has a lot of issues. That's not quite his squad. Goalkeeping is still a big issue. He would love to play out from the back, but De Gea just cannot always find the right pass, or is not as confident. So he's like, De Gea, kick it long, like get it out of there.
Yeah,
get it into midfield. Like, let's deal with it on the transition there. And he's got the team to deal with it there, right? He's like, we're going to deal with the transition. Casemiro can help when Casemiro is on. We can go long to Wout, who can try to win an aerial battle, but we'll take the transition for midfield. We're just not quite able to control the ball in the defense through the goalkeeper quite yet.
Before he signed for United, and there was that whole debate with there was a number of names in the frame, and I just remember reading up on Ten Hag, and one of the comments that really stood out, and I think it was Steve McLaren that said this. He called Ten Hag the best reader of the game he'd ever worked with. And I think more than anything else, right, because he's done a number of things really well, this is what's kind of really standing out for me, is just how well he reads the game and he's able to tweak things. And this is genuinely the first time since Fergie that I felt this way, where if the team go a goal down or they're not playing well in the first half, for the first time in about a decade, I'm actually relaxed at halftime. I'm not fidgeting around going, oh my God, I've got to sit through like another 45 minutes of this. Like, it's like, he'll sort them out. He will sort this out. I don't know about you, Kevin, but do you get the same vibe with him, that like, even if United aren't playing well, he will sort them out?
Yeah, I don't. I think he's probably one of the best tactical coaches. Game reading tactical coaches, because some coaches know that they have to do something and they'll do something, but it won't be the right thing. Often with Ten Hag, it's the right change at the right time, and you can see the shift. It's not like it's a tangible thing. It's like the way that the players all of a sudden, there's some sort of action at this particular point in the pitch where you're going, why is it so soft around here? There's like open space on that. Yeah. When you're watching the game, you can see those things, right? And anybody who's played any sort of group sport or team sport before knows that when you're on the pitch, you can be completely oblivious to that. So to be able to like translate that onto action, I think he's probably one of the best in the league.
And look, that's a really good point about sometimes just doing the obvious thing, right? And again, look, shameless plug for the back pass here. Not that we're quite at that Ten Hag level, but I'll use the example of the last 3 games, right? So if we go to that Leicester game at halftime, I know on the WhatsApp group we were all saying we got to hold the ball better in the final third. We're not looking after it really well, and Leicester are just counterattacking. What does he do? He brings Sancho on, and we hold the ball really well in midfield. That midweek game against Barcelona, I think it was Ali that was saying Bruno on the right isn't working. We've got to bring Anthony on. We've got to move Bruno back into the middle, and we've got to stretch the game out. And bang on, that's what he does. And
straight
Ali, I think you called it this morning that Dalot's got to go off. We've got to bring Wan Bissaka on.
Yeah.
And what a substitution! That and this is what I mean. Like, often the likes of Oli, the likes of Jose, wouldn't do the obvious thing. And Ali, if I'm not mistaken, it was you that brought up the example of Ollie not taking Fred off in that PSG game when it was such an obvious thing
you could
to
just
do.
see he was just
right?
running into players. He was running into players. He's like, this guy's going to get sent off. Like, he's on a yellow. He's going to get himself sent off. Get him off the field.
And the number of times under Jose or under Louis van Gaal where the tempo in the game clearly needed lifting. Either we were down or with about 20 minutes to go, we went ahead. And they were just making like-for-like changes, right? So if you're taking a right back off and you're bringing a right back on, it's very different to what Ten Hag did today. The change today was proactive. He basically said, I know what Newcastle are going to do. I know they're going to run at Dalot, so I'm going to take off the guy on the yellow card. But often what previous managers would do would be no change in shape. It would be a like-for-like change, and it wouldn't have a material impact on the game. I don't get that vibe with Ten Hag. He is genuinely an elite tactician. And I agree he doesn't have all the tools at the moment, right? The hair, we know, it's well documented that he can't play out from the back. I think we saw at times today where when you can get around Casemiro, the midfield with Fred has issues, right? Either defensively or offensively.
Yeah.
And Rashid did look a little bit tired. I think that, the games are starting to have an impact on him. Without Rashford, we don't really have another genuine goal threat. But these are all issues to sort out in the summer, right? And I love the fact that, unlike Jose Mourinho, Ten Hag doesn't make excuses. He doesn't say that we can't win stuff because I don't have all my toys, right? He's instilled that mentality that there are no excuses. Every game is there to be won, and he genuinely believes that, and I love that.
And like the whole Dalot and AVB thing, like he's clearly decided that in games when he needs a bit more defensive solidity, Aaron Wan-Bissaka gets picked. Aaron Wan-Bissaka starts. When he needs a bit more on the attacking side, and he wanted to attack Newcastle today, he puts Dalot on. And what happened was Alan Saint-Maximin just targeted Dalot. Dalot got a yellow card, and he knew Alan Saint-Maximin wouldn't stop. So AWB comes on, and suddenly Eddie Howe hooks Alan Saint-Maximin because he's like, you're not having the same impact anymore. AWB's got you locked up. Like, get him off the field, put someone else on, because that tactic's now wasted.
So do you think, look, I think Eddie Val's a pretty good coach as well. Like, to be able to make that kind of change that quickly, do you think Newcastle don't have the talent to shift as much? Like, what's the difference between Newcastle and Man U at the moment? Because the other thing I'll say is that I think Newcastle can beat Barcelona. I think at this level, at the way that Barcelona is playing in those last two games, that they can definitely beat Barcelona. And I think it may be like a 1-0 or like a very low scoring game. But I think they have the tactics and the discipline to be able to do that.
I think Eddie Howe's a really good coach, and he is just lacking quality in key positions. Like, I mean, you look at who they played in midfield, right? Like, I mean, Bruno's great. Like, he's showing why he's great. Bruno Guimaraes, but then he's got Longstaff behind him, who does he really match up to Casemiro? Or like Busquets or FDJ, like, that there's that slight quality difference there. And then up front again, Callum Wilson. Callum Wilson's a good striker and good Premier League striker as well, and has had a pretty strong career, but he has weaknesses, and he's not quite that that next quality level. And the hope is that Isaac is, but there are just that few couple, and even if you look at across the back line, like I guess Shah, and then who have they got? They've got
Botman,
and Dan Burn.
Yeah. And Kieran Trippier definitely. I think he could fit into the Barcelona squad. Barcelona would take him. Yeah, they would sign anyone right now.
And I do agree. And I think this was discussed when we had the likes of Adam on the show, when we were looking at what Newcastle, and I agree, Kevin. I think Newcastle are genuinely a top four side. I think their biggest weakness today was not having a not having a midfielder like Frankie de Jong, someone who could carry the ball really well. Because it now I know we spoke about Bruno Guimaraes carrying the ball really well and Almiron carrying the ball really well, but I think what they needed when they went to a 4-4-2 was they kind of needed someone at the base of that midfield who had that similar profile to what De Jong has, where he's very press resistant. It doesn't matter if you go man to man with him. You know, if Bruno goes man to man or Fred goes man to man, he's just going to spin him around and turn him around and, basically have Casemiro come out of that. Because basically in the second half, what Casemiro was doing was he was like a third centre back, right?
Yeah, he was.
Newcastle just couldn't lure him out of that, which took Wilson out of the game. I think they kind of needed that different profile of midfielder, someone who could pass the ball better, carry the ball with a little bit more quality, that would sort of just pry United out of shape, like at times Barcelona did. I don't think they kind of had that quality. And secondly, I think as good as St. Maximin is, we could see in that second half when he couldn't get past Wan-Bissaka, he was kind of doing that thing that like the really good dribbler at high school does. Like when you can't get past him, he's just going to keep trying different tricks and he'll just like go down this hole. And the only thing you can do at that point is sub him off, right? Which is what Eddie Howe did. I think they need a profile of a wide player who's sort of similar to Anthony or Jadon Sancho. Someone creative, but creative in a link-up sense, right? Someone, and again, we saw it time and time again where even in that first half where St. Maxim was toasting Dalot, Varane was just going over and covering, right? Because all he would do is he would beat Dalot and then he would try and beat the next man, right? Now, he's a great dribbler, but how often are you going to beat Varane, right? And if you get past Varane, how often are you going to beat Varane and Casemiro? Not very often. I think what you sort of needed was someone who had that kind of awareness to say, actually, it's a good time to pass here because I've beaten one man. There's an overlap. I'm just going to fire that really sharp ball into midfield, and the goal will actually come from the other side, because that's probably where the overlap is. Kind of how Brighton and Brentford were opening us up, early doors. But yeah, as Ali says, I think a better quality and more variety in their team, and I think they're genuinely, I would say they're probably not too far away from being a fixture in the top four.
No, it's also that Newcastle currently handcuffed by FPP regulations and try to stick to it. So
correct,
they will spend 150 million a year every summer window and get like a couple more of the right players or 2 or 3 more of the right players, and suddenly they'll have like a stacked team in a few years' time, and we'll be like, how do they get all these amazing players?
And again, for all of our analysis, right? Like, look at the first 30 minutes of that game, right? When Trippier when he started getting forward and they started overlapping on Shaw's side, there was a couple of whip balls that they put in. There was that ball that I think it was Almiron put in that went across to ASM, and ASM totally skinned Dalot, and he had that shot that De Gea saved. If that goes in, it's a totally different conversation, right?
Newcastle probably shut up shop.
The match is completely different, right? So, big games need big moments, and I think the fact that Newcastle didn't get those big moments meant that their lack of quality kind of told.
So, for United, it is now 1 down, 3 more competitions to go. We've still got United still have the UEFA Cup. Obviously, now going to be going against a Spanish team again in Real Betis. And then there's the FA Cup against West Ham coming up, and then the Premier League. So let's talk Premier League for a moment. What no one expected United to be at third, and I think a few months ago I predicted United to win the league. So let's reassess where we're at. What do you think, Kevin?
Look, I don't think we've changed that much for us to be able to win the league. I think our opportunity to win the league is Arsenal floundering, and the court case to deduct points from Man City. Yeah. If that happens, that puts us in second, and if we get a run, then there's a chance that we could. But I almost don't want us to win this year. I think it's enough. It's not like I think it doesn't help us long term, right? Because it sort of hides the facts that we probably need to, and I'm thinking long term in the sense that I think this with Ten Hag, there's a good chance in the next 5 years that we'll win Champions League. If everything sort of aligns, we get the ownership situation right. I don't, especially after this season, I don't think there's anything stopping any player thinking that this team is not a Champions League level team. And so, like, what's stopping players from coming here? Like, it's back in the old days where, this is the place to play. And then if we get a few players that come on and they can fit the system and they follow Ten Hag, sort of same level as Casemiro, then there's a good chance that next we could be on a 5-year run, maybe even a 10-year run on top of that.
I guess the fear is that with this season, City are slightly off pace and Liverpool are completely off pace. And it's Arsenal who are kind of starting to show some signs of weaknesses. Is that waiting for another season? And, United have had 2 second place finishes within the last 10 years. But the season after, they've not made Champions League. Right? So it's following that up. And I think, they're very likely City and Liverpool fix their problems in the summer. And next season is another 100-point minimum kind of season where both teams just hit the ground running and they're just fully determined because they were crap last season and, Klopp and Pep got them fired up and going from the start.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting point because what you're talking about there is how much room does Man City and Liverpool have to go? It kind of seems like Klopp's trying to change the way that they played because they've hit the ceiling on their current structure. I mean, that's the only reason that I can see that have Salah playing out completely in a different position than he's dominated the league for. Right, he's not in the middle anymore; he's out wide most of the time. So I think Klopp's trying to change things up to try and get to that point. How much space is there for us to grow? How much space does Man United have to grow? And I look at it like this: if we come second this year, I still think there's about maybe 40 or 50% of growth in this team, especially with the right additions. Like, imagine this team with FDJ in it, or an FDJ level player.
I will counter your argument with United finished second under Ole Gunnar, and we said, imagine this team with Rafa Varane, Jadon Sancho, and Cristiano Ronaldo in it. It fixes all our problems. This becomes this team, nearly all our problems because we still didn't have a defensive midfielder then. But those three, it was like, we've got a champion centre back, we've got a champion striker, we've got a gun winger. This is now going to take us from second to first. But in switching to progressive, Ole Gunnar's team actually went backwards.
The counter argument to that, Ali, is that team under Ole probably didn't have what I believe is the biggest strength of this team, which is Ten Hag, right? Like, you fundamentally have someone now at the club who, I will say, since Ferguson is now I feel Ten Hag is now the most important person at this club, right? It's not Marcus Rashford, it's not Casemiro, it's not Rafa Varane, it is Ten Hag. This is Ten Hag's team, right? He is top dog, right? And I think under that top dog, you've kind of got a bunch of characters now that are, well, for starters, they're not Harry Maguire, right? So you've got Casemiro, you've got Licha Martinez, you've got Rafa Varane, you've got Bruno Fernandes. I think this is a team that is not going to accept a lowering of standards after a second place finish. So I do think United's ceiling, if you look at the teams around us, the teams we're going to be competing with, is higher. I do believe it's a 30 to 40% improvement in this team. But I think it's not going to be as clear cut next year because Newcastle are going to get better. We talk about Arsenal, right? Arsenal are on an upwards to, I think Arsenal could get 20% better, right? Yeah. They have a better profile of midfielder. They get 20 to 30% better. Liverpool, I think things are going to get worse. I actually think this team needs to be cleaned out and he needs to start again. And I don't know if Klopp has it in him to start again, but he almost needs to do that thing that Fergie did where you kind of recognize that actually, you know what? It is probably time to start moving some of their players on so that you can start replacing them. City for me are the really interesting one, right? I don't really know what's happening with them, right? Like there's weeks where they look incredible, and then there's other weeks where it's like, how are you the dominant team in England, right? Like you're struggling to break down a low block. I don't really know what direction City are going to go in. In all honesty, like they are a bit of a conundrum for me. Even defensively, they don't look as secure as they've done in the past. And they don't have that excuse of like Ruben Dias is missing. So like, come meet us outside when he's back. Like he is back now and you still can't keep a clean sheet. Like Chris Wood scored against them just last week.
Why do you make it sound like that's a bad thing or like that's a terrible thing for Man City?
Well, actually, interestingly, Chris Wood would have become.
Well, let's put it in context. Wait, hold on. Let's put it in context. How much is Chris Wood's salary and how much is that backline salary? It's like an order of magnitude difference. It's not...
and this is it. This is it, right? It's not a slight against Chris Wood, who actually would have become. We laugh about Martin Dubravka, but Chris Wood would have become the first New Zealander to win a major trophy had Newcastle won today because he was cup tied. He's played for Newcastle.
Yeah.
But so a very good striker. But as you say, Kevin, when you compare his salary to the likes of Erling Haaland or Kevin De Bruyne, it's chalk and cheese, right?
Yeah.
So City. I'm struggling to get a read on City. The team I worry about though is Chelsea, right? Like with that amount of talent, they are going to come right at some point, and you've potentially got another top 4 challenger there.
And then you also then worry is even top 4 a guarantee, let alone winning the league.
And I think this is where I think there is this need for investment, right? Ali, I mean, you said it yourself, right? We had second place finishes, and then we flunked out each of the last few years. If I'm not mistaken, that year that Jose finished second, we got Fred, Dalot, and a backup goalkeeper, right? And Jose completely threw his toys out, right? So we hardly improved on the squad that finished second. Under Oli, yes, you're right. We got Jadon Sancho, we got Rafa Varane, we got Cristiano Ronaldo. I know all of us said it. What we actually needed more than any of those three was a Casemiro, right? And we're seeing what Casemiro is doing this year, right? And now, Oli, again, I don't think he was big enough. I don't think he was quite the personality that a Ten Hag is to say, actually, no, I don't want Ronaldo. Go get me FDJ or go get me Casemiro. This is what I think the difference is. I think Ten Hag is big enough to say, and I think the club have learned from the mistakes we've made. Like, for example, I know with the recruitment, one of the roles that Darren Fletcher plays is there's a big emphasis placed on the character of the players. Yeah. So what are their personalities like? What are they like in the dressing room? I don't think we want to repeat the mistakes we've made with, I'm not going to name any players, but certain players with, initials, with initials like PP, I don't think we want to repeat those mistakes. And the fact that we're looking at these intangibles now, beyond just retweets and, social media reach. It bodes well.
I just wanted to add, Gurpreet, that you have been learning and watching a lot from Ten Hag. That the fact that you're playing so well on the transition that you countered a counter.
It's all about countering that counter. That's that's the biggest thing I've learned from Ten Hag.
That's when they're most vulnerable. That's when the opposition's most vulnerable.
And actually, I mean, let's be honest. Like, joking aside, what he called perfectly today was he predicted what Newcastle were going to do. Like he knew Newcastle were going to go 4-4-2. They would bring a Saka on, and the moment they did that, he kind of went,
like, yep.
Bruno, you're back in the 8. Yep, I know exactly what you're going to do."
Yep.
And 10 minutes later, you're going to struggle to get the ball into midfield, and your defenders are going to start carrying the ball out, and I'll just move out deeper, and I will. There was that chance that where Bissaka made that tackle around halfway, and he got the ball off their defender. And if were it not for a bit of, if I think it was Sancho at that point or one of our attackers, if there was just a bit of pass, it would have been 3-0 and game over, right?
Yep.
Again, I think his ability to predict what the opposition manager is going to do and proactively plan for that is just exceptional. It's refreshing, honestly. It's not a Jose Mourinho type of like shithousery. It's more tactical, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's not prediction. I think he forces, or his tactics forces the other team to play in a particular way.
He
right?
likes cornering and oppositions, right? Like
he does
him into a corner that he wants them to go
exactly. Into. Yeah, he pushes oppositions into positions that he wants to play them in, and then he settles back and then does what he wants.
And I think Ali made the point really well earlier. I think what lets him down at times is our lack of quality in those key areas that Ali named, right? Like the fact that we don't have a midfielder in the profile of FDJ, right? Like when, and I think we saw this against Leeds, when Leeds put that mid block against us and they pressed us really well, we didn't really have a truly press resistant midfielder, right? Again, we saw it in that first half against Barcelona where when you double up against Rashford and you deny him that space in behind, without another outlet, United struggle for goals. These are two very obvious weaknesses in this team, and De Gea we know about, right? So the scary thing is you plug those holes and you upgrade those positions, and I think we're looking at a 30 to 40% upgrade, as you said, Kevin.
Yeah. Now, also look at it from the perspective of Jadon Sancho is not playing his best, not by a long shot, and Anthony, while he started, really well, I don't think he's sort of dipped off a little bit, but the team is still covering for him. Like, there's been a couple of games where he's starting to come back up. So it's the balance factor and the depth there in the way that this team sort of fits together. I think that's probably one of the biggest changes that I've seen, especially from last year. I think last year, if anybody dips in form, nobody can cover it. And it just sort of perpetuates a downward cycle.
Yeah. I think it was one of the earlier, when you joined the team, Kevin, you kind of made the point. It was one of the first sort of United-based shows we had with yourself. You made the point about coaching and the need for United to not continuously just look at the transfer window to sign an upgrade on Wan-Bissaka, say, right? Like, because at the end of the day, we have a £50 million right back. And I think this is kind of the biggest thing we've seen with Ten Hag is where he has improved just about every player at the club, right? And that's directly through coaching. But also, one of the things that he's done, and Sancho's a good example of this, he's a player who isn't quite playing at his potential, but he's still adding value to the team, right? It's that thing that Fergie could do where he could say, okay, you know what? Like, you're not scoring me 25 goals a season, but you still have a role to play in the team, right? The number of times he managed Rooney through form routes, right? Where Rooney was this very streaky player who would go on runs where he would score 12 in 5 games and then not score for like another 10 games. But Fergie had a way to fit Rooney into the system. Fergie had a way to put Ji-sung Park into the system, right? Fergie had a way to put Phil Neville into the system. And And again, this is a feeling I get with Ten Hag is he is able to take the more limited players in the team, but find a role for them to be effective, and none more so than what Weghorst, who, I mean, let's be honest, we can
Yeah.
laugh at Chris Wood, but Wout is not that much better, but he has a very important role to play in this team.
Yep.
Yeah.
Highly agree.
Yeah, it's a big contrast between him and Wilson. Like Wilson got buried up front and then could not do anything. Like he was just as passenger for the rest of that game.
He
But
was.
Wout, even though he may not be, scoring goals or doing anything, that kind of stuff, he still does something. He drops back, covers a little bit, he puts a little bit of press on. He does something to keep the game going and keep, trying to get somebody else an advantage at least.
Yeah. It's that very Fergie-esque thing where, like, when Ronaldo in 08, when Ronaldo was in hot form, and at times Tevez and Rooney were struggling, Fergie kind of made it clear that, look, Ronaldo's the guy who's going to be scoring the goals, but you guys have to put a shift in on the wings. And the amount of times that Tevez and Rooney in particular totally swung games for us just by doing the hard yards, right? They would lock down the opposition fullbacks and they would track and track and track. And that kind of allowed Ronaldo to shine. I kind of get the same impression that Ten Hag's sort of gone, look, Rashi is like our biggest goal threat, right? So in order to give him that space and that license to play off the shoulder of the last defender, everyone else has to work, right? Whether that's Bruno or that's Anthony or that's Sancho or that's Wout, and we'll kind of set the platform for him to shine. And yeah, it's that Fergie thing of we sacrifice for the team, which I don't think we've had in the past. Even under Jose, I don't think we've had this level of discipline.
And I did have one more thing for you, Kevin. Paul Scholes, in his article, recently referred to Casemiro as the closest thing United have got to Roy Keane. How big a compliment is that?
Yeah, that's a pretty big compliment. But I think if he does 2 seasons of this, I'd say yeah. I'd say this is probably the closest thing since Roy Keane. But he's got it. Like Roy Keane was doing it for ages. Like, it's not.
Yeah, of course.
It's not. It's not like the.
But he's the closest equivalent to Roy Keane that United have ever had.
The other thing is like comparing players from different eras. And it's a big difference as well. Like the physicality. There's not. I think there's probably less physicality now than there was before. The games, even though that the English league is a lot more physical than, say, the Spanish league, or the French league. It's not what it was before, and Roy Keane was just so dominant. But I think that sort of speaks to the type of player that he is and what he's doing. I think it's more of that than the actual
control
skill sets
that he's having on the team.
Exactly, yeah. The impact. Yeah. But I also think that his impact is replicable, right? I think there are players out there who could be maybe not replace him like for like, but be able to get a facsimile of that on the other side of the pitch. Maybe do 75% of what he's doing right now. And I think that's what we're missing, because as soon as he goes and Eriksen's gone out of the team, there is a big difference. It's too much of a gap at the moment.
Yeah, it is a bit of a drop.
And I do wonder with Scholesy saying that, how much of it is not so much of his, I guess, footballing attributes, but just around the character that he brings. And that's the thing that I think is harder to replace, right? And I think we saw it in the final today, right? Like the fact that, was it in the second half or the first half, where he kind of cleared the ball near our goal line and he kind of got up and he was geeing the crowd up, right? Like just the character that Casemiro is. And it's been documented all over the internet, but the little kind of, in air quotes, argument that he had with Bruno about not passing it, at 2-0 and making it 3-0. Like this guy is a serial winner, like Kino was, right? Like he's probably back in the training ground this morning saying, "Hey, enough partying, let's go again." Right? I think whenever Casemiro goes or whenever he needs to be replaced, it's finding that mindset. That's going to be the difficulty. But equally, I think Ten Hag is able to identify those characters, right? Like the fact that he repeatedly mentions not Casemiro and Varane, but Martinez, right? And I mean, let's be honest, guys. Like, here's a player that look, three of us here, we're pretty mad about football. How many of you thought Martinez was this type of character? Because I certainly didn't.
Yeah. How many of us would have said that Martinez would be this, not only this, but be also a World Cup winner in the same year, right? Like, let's put it into context. That tackle that he made, that tackle where he cleared, he had studs up at the time, but to have the courage to do that with his size and to play with his size, play with physicality with his size is not something that a lot of players can do. I think Martinez over Dalot has really impressed me, and I think, like, if you think about it, we've got Varane and Martinez in the middle, and they both have done amazing jobs. And Varane has got the pedigree because he's been doing it for a long time, but Martinez is, he's been amazing. And it's two things there though. Like, when Cass saves us in situations where if Fred makes a mistake, right, and the ball's loose, Cass is the first person there. But the same also is true for Martinez, because I see him when Shaw makes a mistake or somebody else makes a mistake, he's the one who's sprinting across the field to make the cover tackle.
Yeah, and this is the thing that kind of gives me a lot of optimism about Ten Hag. The fact that he so desperately wanted him at United, right? Like, he was one of, you could say the Casemiro signing was a little bit, I know we did an entire podcast on this, right? Like, it was possibly reactive to not getting FDJ, but Martinez, he was like,
that's the one I want.
He was top of the list, right? He is my guy. You go sign him. And I know he didn't do it at the time, but it's so obvious now that Martinez was the guy he wanted to replace Maguire in the first 11, right? Yep. It's blindingly obvious now.
Yep.
The fact that he is just so physical, he is such a leader. He's got this tenacity, but he's also such a good ball player, right? Like, he never gives the ball away when he's distributing it. And then this is the thing with Ten Hag, like, the fact that he's able to go and identify these characters, right? It kind of makes me feel that whatever budget we have, whatever money we have, it's in safe hands. He will find a way to make us better, which again makes him the most important man at this club.
Yeah. Bruno's a great example of that. I would have said at the start of this year he wouldn't have made a good captain, but he's come on leaps and bounds. Like, he's grown with the captaincy.
Yeah, and really, a good point. You touch on the, it wasn't Maguire lifting the trophy today. It was a joint hoisting of the trophy, which I think is kind of another indication that Maguire's the club captain, but Bruno's the real captain. Yeah, Bruno's the actual captain.
Yeah.
Well, that's all we have time for this week, guys. That's a lot of love and a lot of chat about Manchester United and their future trajectory. Thank you to our panel for their thoughts and opinions on this. If you want to get sports nerdy with the team, you can reach us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at the Backpass Pod. We'll be back next week with more sports analysis and banter right here on the Backpass.